on this computer. Okay, somebody else is chiming in. Okay, let's share screen. Wait. Okay, I'm sorry. This is a different system than I'm used to working with. And it just doesn't want to do everything from one screen like I'm used to doing. I'm going to confuse it. Okay, hold on. This needs to be here. And then this. Needs to. There we go. Maybe I'm finding everything. I apologize for the delay, everyone. I'm trying to work through some technical issues. Okay. No, I don't want that. I want this. Okay, that's going to be it. We're going to just go for it from there. So we are here for the Parenting Gifted Children Workshop Series 2025. And this is session 2. Session 1 was last week. Most of you guys that are in the room were here. Some were not. And our Zoom link last week somehow had a corrupted link. So this will be the first day that we're getting to do Zoom. That's why I'm having to work out how it actually works in this room. Every room on campus seems to be a little bit different. But just in case people did not hear last week, I do want to, well, where did we go? I have one more thing. That's okay. I do want to let you know a little bit about the center itself. We were founded in 1979, and in 1999 it was renamed for Dr. Carnes. She was the one who began the center, and you can see our mission there on the screen, and we are still working on those 4 elements to make sure that we have outstanding program for children and youth. That's what the Saturday program that is going on right now is part of. We have 5 different programs that run throughout the year. The Saturday Gifted Studies program is one of our day programs. We have a similar day program in June that is the Young Gifted Students program. We have a Students in the Middle program that runs concurrently with that. Both of those are the second full week in June. Summer in the Middle is for, of course, middle school children. And then we have the following week, the third full week in June, we have the Summer Gifted Studies program, which is a residential program for grades 4 through 8. They spend the night in the dorm. They eat their meals in the cafeteria. We have afternoon activities for them. We have a dorm staff that has been with us for 14 years. Our dorm director has been with us that long. And so we're really grateful to have Kelly, and she runs the dorm very well. She just takes care of so many things there, and we work together very well. And then the week after that, we have our Leadership Studies program. That is for students who are in 6th through 11th grade, or they have just finished those grades. And it allows children to discover who they are as a leader, and it allows them to develop a platform for leadership. I think last week I told some of you a little bit about the wonderful things that our leadership students have done. And I won't repeat all of that, but if you haven't gotten to hear that, I will send that out in that recording when that is complete. So we do have programming for teachers in the form of online training that will be opening later this month. For teachers who want extras to build their skills that they already have, that if they are certified in gifted education, and if they are not yet certified in gifted education, to build those skills before they take the praxis exam that gets them that licensure. We do conduct research in best practices for gifted education, and right now we don't have a research project currently going, but we are working with some of the teachers in the educator development program to decide on what action research will be done in their classrooms in the coming months and maybe even next year or the following year. So that is ongoing, depending on who we have in the program at the time. And then outreach to parents includes things like this program and an advocacy group that we are trying to get started. That is something that's going to be new. We'll try to get a team together this spring to help us formulate that, and then in the fall really kick that off when the school year starts. So if anyone is interested in being part of an advocacy group for parents, please connect with me and let me know that you're interested in being part of that group. So, who am I? Why am I here standing next to you today? I am Dr. Heather Houston. I am the director of the Center for Gifted Studies. I am a professional educator. I'm also a nonprofit administrator. What I bring to you comes from the study of educational philosophy, meaning I examine the ideas found in the realm of intellectual and cognitive functioning. That realm is supported by research in the classroom and other educational spaces. Also, that is informed by the realm of brain research. The two worlds overlap in their scope of studies, of study, but I do want to let you know that educators are not medical professionals, okay? One thing I tell my college students who are studying to get different educational degrees is do not make the mistake of trying to diagnose a student. That is not your role. That is that's educational malpractice if you are trying to run a medical practice as an educator. That does not go together. So the other side of my knowledge is in the world of business, particularly nonprofit, and I work with teachers to help improve their practice. I work with parents and families to help them make the most of their educational experiences. I design educational curriculum for our programs for children, and also in the realm of teacher training. So integrated enrichment courses are my specialty, what we do here at the center, and that means that we take at least 4 domains, the one that the topic comes from, as well as at least 2 other academic and maybe 1 or 2 arts areas, and we blend those together so that your student is not just getting their program that they participate in doesn't just come from only English or only math. We're trying to integrate all of those subject area domains so that they see it in a real world perspective and can transfer that knowledge to new situations. Gifted children do that anyway, so we want to help them train their brain metacognitively to do it effectively. So that is one thing that we're doing. Okay. Again, the difference between these professions is very important, but they may work together. So teachers are with your child between 1 and 8 hours every day of the week, except Saturday and Sunday. They observe your child in group settings. They base their advice on engaging, on the patterns of engagement your child has with other children their age. And so they can tell you how they compare to other children, what's going on in their world as far as how they communicated today, who they played with today, whether they were engaged or not. Now, that does not mean that they are deeply engaged with every child in the classroom, because there are multiple children in the classroom at a time. And anything that the teacher is going to suggest to you either comes from a behavioral modification type of background or some kind of communication strategy or things for working with other people, or it is based in teaching methodology, like how to learn this subject better. Okay, so that side of the brain, that side of communication. A therapist, on the other hand, only works with you or your child or your family 1 to 3 hours a week, or maybe every other week whenever your appointments are scheduled. And they observe your child and you individually, not in comparison. Sometimes you have play therapy and things like that where there are some interactions with other children, but for the most part it's a one-on-one situation. And they base their advice on what you have communicated to them and your perception of the situation that you're in. They're trying to help you modify your thinking and behavior based on what you're telling them is going on in your brain. Okay? And a therapist, if they have the right degrees and things, can prescribe medication. Teachers cannot. So, if a teacher tells you your child needs medication, they're in the wrong seat. They're wearing the wrong hat. Unless they are also trained as a medical professional, that's not something that a teacher should do. I just wanted, based on questions that we had at the end last week, I wanted to make sure that we understood that and we all kind of are on the same page there, and that you have that knowledge so that if you have a teacher, and we do have lots of teachers in the world that try to tell parents what their child needs medically, that you know that's not their job, that's not their role. You don't have to, that is not the gospel. You do not have to listen to that. You can take it under advisement for what it's worth, but a teacher is not a medical professional. Okay? If they're giving you strategies to help them learn their homework better, strategies to help them remember things better, yes, that's what a teacher is supposed to help you do. Okay. So we are in week 2 of the series. We started last week with reflecting, and this week we're talking about communicating. Okay, so what does it actually mean to communicate? Well, this is just a definition that I looked up online. Anybody could find this. This is no special research in this world. But it is the sharing or exchanging information. I've highlighted some important words. Exchange, impart, nonverbal, evoke understanding, able to share and understand. So communication, right now, my communication to you is traveling in one direction. But in your family, it needs to go in both directions, in multiple directions. Okay? And so the idea is that you can take what I share with you and you can use it. You can build upon it. You can do something else with it. It's not just to hear me talk, right? And when you're the parent, it should be the same. It's not just to hear yourself talk or so your kid can hear you talk. It's to convey something about yourself, about your heart, about your desires for their life, so that they can respond to that and incorporate that into their identity, who they are. Okay? Just one more thing about me, if you haven't figured it out yet, I am a believer, and so my lens is that we're all created with the gifts and talents that we have for a purpose. And so what I tell you and what I talk to you about comes partially, at least, through that lens as well, not just my educational training. So if you ask me a question, that's where I'm coming from with my answer. If you don't like that, you're welcome to go listen to someone else. It's fine. I'm not going to be offended, but I would like to be transparent with that as well. Okay, so communication is very, very important in that way. Why are we working on communication in a parenting workshop for gifted children? Okay, well, last week, if you were here, we looked at this slide, and I know it's really, really tiny up here, but these were all those characteristics of gifted children that you are all kind of, yes, mine does that. Oh, we do that at my house. And things like their sense of humor or their intense curiosity or learning very quickly or at a different pace. We talked about the difficulties that come with some of the gifts. We talked about anxiety, we talked about underachievement, we talked about all kinds of things. So these two things together, the characteristics and the difficulties, the challenges that you face, make communication all of these 4 things. It can be challenging. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics that you think? This is your turn. We're talk back room. What are some of those characteristics that you remember from last week that make communication challenging?
Heightened emotional sensitivity.
The heightened emotional sensitivity, for sure. Anything else? They're so quiet today.
We gotta warm up.
Y'all gotta warm up, yeah. That's okay. Okay, what would make it odd? What's a characteristic that would make communication just a little odd?
I think when we're trying to communicate something to them and we say one thing and they hear something else.
Right. When you speak and they don't hear what came out of your mouth. You're working at cross purposes, you're looking through different lenses, you're in a different place emotionally. So that my husband says that is, we're using the same vocabulary, but we have a different dictionary, right? So, and I love that. That's he has a lot of great quotes. You'll hear me quote him sometimes. What about gifted students makes communication important?
I think ensuring that as we're raising children, we want them to feel validated and worthy, and so communication is a big component to that, and so having good communication.
Yes. Okay. Absolutely. Anything else?
Just knowing that they can speak up, like it's safe.
Yes. Yes.
You can speak.
Knowing that you have a place that is allowing you to express who you are is important. Okay, and then communication can also be life-giving. The world tries to tear our gifted kids down a lot because there's a kind of a saying in Australia about, they call it topping the poppies. If you have a field of poppies and one or two grow up taller than the other, well, that just ruins the whole view. Let's chop those off, okay? And so there's a really famous article on gifted children where the educator that's writing it, the researcher that's writing it, compares what happens in schools to gifted children to topping the poppies. We're gonna shut it down, bend it over, make them match, because we have to be at grade level and we have to be age appropriate. Well, guess what? That doesn't necessarily work for gifted students. So we're going to go through, in the next few slides, we're going to look at some things that are kind of mysteries to us as parents as they begin unfolding, if we haven't seen them before, and we start to see these things pop up in our kids when they're young or when they hit middle school or when they hit those different ages. So we're going to look at some things that make communication this wonderful journey with our kids. I'm going to look a little deeper. Okay, asynchronous development. We talked about that a little bit last week, and basically asynchronous development means the different parts of your child mature at different rates. Their intellect, their emotional readiness, their social need, their social engagement ability, all of those things mature at very different rates sometimes. When their intellect races ahead, like our gifted students often do, they kind of ignore the social because they're so involved in what's going on in their mind that this engagement out here with other people is like, what? Wait, huh? They don't quite do it well unless that is the thing that fascinates them. Okay, if that is the thing that has caught their intellectual attention is how people communicate, then they're going to be very good at that. Okay, but most children are not interested in that until they get much older. They're very involved with, and it's not selfish, it's just self-involved. So when we see asynchronous development, one of the things that we can hear in a school system is we may hear the word, well, that's just not age appropriate. We're not reading chapter books yet. They can't bring that from home. Why not? Okay. So this is what some teachers don't understand. And again, to have a general teacher's license, you do not have to have any training in gifted education. Only if you are pursuing a license in gifted education do you have to have that training. So the majority of teachers that your children will have never had any training in gifted education. Okay, so they've probably never heard the term asynchronous development. They probably do not know what it is or how it appears in children, and they need your help, not as a combatant, but as a partner, to help them understand this is what's going on we have this ruling, we know this is what's going on, this is how this shows up or manifests in my child.
And you're so right, because it wasn't until my daughter matriculated into the gifted program that it was flagged for me, some of the asynchronous development differences and struggles that she was having, some things that a gifted teacher was noticing and pointed out to me.
Right, and as a parent, especially if it's your first child, or if your children are very similar to one another, you may not ever see that. This is your norm. This is what you deal with every day. What a teacher's going to talk about is how different they are from one another. This isn't what most kids do at this age. Well, it's what my kids do at this age. So again, you're coming from those different places in your communication with the teacher at that point. So, again, age appropriate explains the expectations of what children should do at a particular age. That comes out of Piaget's studies in child development years ago. They looked at averages of children and decided between this age and this age, all children are going to do this, and they don't do this stage until they reach this age. Well, a lot of our gifted children kind of jump over or into and out of those different stages as far as Piaget is concerned. But what we can look at is that the developmentally appropriate, that term, that comes out of early childhood education, and it looks at children who are exceptional in one way or the other. And we use exceptional to encompass both giftedness and any disability or learning differences that children may have. That way, exceptional just means anything outside the norm, okay? So developmentally appropriate allows us to talk about what they are ready for now. What are they doing? What is their next step? And that's more appropriate to use with gifted students than age appropriate. Now, that being said, they are still children. There are certain things their mind may be ready for that we know their emotions in their heart are not ready for, that we still want to kind of hold them, make sure that we're giving them the appropriate information at the appropriate time. And I think I said to some of you last time, the best way to find out what they are ready for is ask them what they already know. When that "where do babies come from" question pops up, where do you think they come from? What do you already know about that? Let them tell you, and then you're not giving them this whole thing that they're not ready for. You're correcting any misunderstandings and giving them the next piece of what they need to know for now. And that way you don't scare them to death.
First grade.
Right. Children can ask some pretty deep questions, especially if friends at school are asking or exposed to different things, and it's our job as parents to decide these are the boundaries in our family, this is where we go, and that's not what we do. So you have the authority as the parent to say those things and to help them navigate those things. Okay, so let's move forward. Okay, we talked a little bit about overexcitabilities last time, and I love this graphic. This is actually from the world of decibels. It's trying to explain the term intensity in the terms of sound. So you have this sweet little bird just chirping away, but when it becomes more intense, he looks like a bird of prey over there about to attack somebody. So overexcitabilities are also called intensities in gifted children, and that's I think that picture says a lot. So I'm going to pause for a second and see if I can let anybody else in the room. Nope, I don't see where that can go. So those are from Dabrowski's research, and these intensities may be active or inactive in each particular gifted student, okay? These are things that this is part of their gift. This is part of what they get to unwrap every day in life. They may have one of these intensities, they may not have all of them, or they may have all of them, okay? But they have them. There's something that they come with, okay? And it's up to us to help them navigate them and communicate with them to gain better regulation skills. And again, gifted students are so in their own mind many times that they have a really, really hard time until they get much older understanding that you do not think like you, and you do not think like me, and you don't think like her, and you don't think like him, and all of the things, right? They have a very difficult time grasping that other people are not thinking the same things I'm thinking. That's why they have trouble playing with other children who have different rules for the games that they want to play. That's why they have trouble with teachers who want them to do something a particular way in class. A lot of that comes from their own understanding of their mind and not understanding that someone else's mind and emotions work differently. So it's a diversity piece for our gifted students, and we need to help them embrace the things that are diverse about themselves. Psychomotor is physical movement, that hand-eye coordination, moving around. A student with a psychomotor overexcitability looks a lot like a student with ADHD. Okay, they may not be the same. There are overlaps, there are very similar behaviors. They might even make that ADHD checklist because of the things. But the why behind it, the underlying reason for their movement and their behavior, is where the difference lies. Many times if you ask if a child gets up, walks across the room, plays with somebody's hair, and wanders or does whatever, okay, and you ask the child, what were you hoping to gain by doing that? A child with ADHD is going to say, I don't know, I just wanted to move. A child who is gifted is likely to tell you, the light was shining on her hair and I thought it might be a bug and I wanted to make sure she didn't have a bug in her hair, or something. They're going to tell you there was a purpose for that. So that's where your differences can come from. Thank you. Things like that. So when you're asking the why questions and the what did you hope to gain question, which is better than why most of the time for gifted children, we talked about that last week. Those are the kinds of differences you'll see between a child with ADHD and a child who is gifted with an overexcitability. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay. A sensual overexcitability, I like to use the term sensory instead because it's a little more where we think of these days of what that actually meant. That came out of the 60s, and so a lot of things around that. But physical sensation brings lots of information to your child. They are gaining information through their senses. So that light flickering right there might cause a little frustration and anxiety. Okay, there's a hum over on this side of the room that's about to drive my left ear crazy. Okay, there's kind of a draft from right here and my right arm is going numb because it's cold. Okay, so those things, I can ignore those things. But if I stop and pay attention to those things, they can drive me absolutely insane. When I was a child, did I have the ability to ignore those things? Nope, I fall into this one. So if your child is complaining about the tag on their shirt, the seam of the sock in their shoe, the belt is twisted, something is off, okay? This is a child who's very distracted by noises in the classroom, if somebody's desk is squeaking, if somebody's tapping a pencil, if the light is humming or buzzing or flickering, if the window shade is different that day. These are things that can really distract them. And this is where they look a little distracted. So that's where we get that attention. It looks like an attention deficit. It's not a deficit, it is an over-attentiveness to those things. It's because that's the way they're gaining information. Why is the information coming to me different? So there's lots of questions. Well, why would a light flicker? Why wouldn't it just go out? Why is that light a different color than that light? Why is all these questions going through their mind about, and it's not random to them. It may sound random, and the one thing that comes out of them verbally may be something off the wall. You're like, what? We're not even talking about that. They've already gone so far down that train of thought that by the time they realize they need to say something, they say the last part of it, and we don't know they've gone there. Okay, so that can be part of that. The intellectual overexcitability is that intense need for more information and new things to think about. This might be your child who's wanting to read all the time, or constantly on the computer, but not to play games, to find information. Okay. Imaginational overexcitabilities, these are children who are really good storytellers. They might be very good artists and cartoonists and things like that. They kind of live in their own little world. They may have lots of imaginary friends. They may write stories. They may paint. There's a lot going on in their imagination. And the thing that we have to really work with gifted children on is that imaginational world can become more real than this world. If they get into gaming, that can be dangerous. There can be an addictive kind of response to that. I mean, it's already designed to be addictive to everybody, but if you have a child who's already prone to living in that imagination and that world captivates their attention, that can be a problem. So you have to talk to them about the boundaries that you believe are healthy for them. We have an e-gaming team here at USM, and they earn their scholarships by playing games and tournaments and things. Like, they don't pay for their tuition because they're paying for it with gaming. It's a whole world that I didn't even know existed until this last year. But their coach calls them his athletes, and you're like, wow, they're just sitting in a chair. But he has to train them. He has to train them when to take a break, when to get water, when to go to the bathroom, because they will not do those things. Okay? So your children can be in that realm as well. Especially gifted children that are very competitive can fall into that. So if that's their area, that might be something to look out for. Emotional overexcitabilities, okay? I'm just going to say this. We are not on Star Trek. We do not actually have empaths, okay? We can be empathetic. We can be, empath, but we don't literally take on the emotions of other people, all right? But a gifted child with this overexcitability will try to. They will look at that other person and they will so get into the way they think they should feel that they reflect that back. They mirror that back, maybe even more intensely than the other student.
Does people pleasing fall into this kind of category?
Yes.
Like just like a deep desire to I was maybe disappointed you, so
Yes.
now I'm gonna try and.
Yes, absolutely. And that people pleasing can come from instability in relationships. If the parents are not on the same page, if you're going through a really ugly divorce, children can pick up that response. It can be a response to trauma in some way. I'm going to watch everybody in the room so that I understand what I have to do to not make any of those people angry, right? And so they take it on inside themselves. So if you have one with an emotional overexcitability and that kind of thing going on, it can deepen what's going on inside them. Not change it necessarily, but deepen it. I had a child one time, this is not about a family situation, but, and I've told this story before and I don't think I told it last week. There was a young lady who had been ridiculed in another classroom before they came to my classroom. And it was kind of a backhanded comment that somebody made. And the young lady herself didn't recognize it as a bad thing. She just went on with her day. My student had witnessed it. came into my class with her head down, tears streaming down her face, and headed to my desk and crawled under it and would not come out. And this was in middle school. This was not first or second grade. This was older children. And this is not your norm. This is not how you normally behave. What is going on with you? She didn't even know they were being mean to her. And I'm like, okay, but is she okay? Yes. Then why are you not? Like, she's fine. But she doesn't understand what they said. I said, okay, is it better that she didn't and she's able to go on with her day? Or is it better that you understand and are stuck? Oh, so we had to talk through it. But she clearly had the emotional overexcitability. She was very wrapped up in the other students' potential emotions or need to have an emotion. She believed that the other student should have had an emotion that she didn't have. And so she felt badly for her, so much so that she was kind of destructive in her own life. So that was not a good situation. So these are ways that your children may express themselves. Again, they are expressing something inside themselves. They are trying to communicate with the only things that they know how to communicate with. And that's why we have to build good communication tools. Okay? And you can find some more information about overexcitabilities on the SENG website, SENG, Supporting Emotional Needs of Gifted. So senggifted.org, SENGIFTED. They moved the sengifted.org.
Can you say that one more time?
SENGIFTED.org. Okay. And then another thing that makes communication difficult with our gifted students is perfectionism. Okay? If we don't catch perfectionism, guess what it leads to? Underachievement. Okay, we talked about that a little bit last time. When children know they can express their thoughts about their performance to you without fear of judgment, they're more likely to ask for your opinion and for your assistance. Okay? But if they're struggling, you can help by asking caring questions and by listening. Don't dismiss these concerns. Okay? When they have all of this going on, don't just say, oh, well, you'll get over that. They don't see a way to get over that. They need you to help them understand how. Okay? And it's a problem-solving process. Getting to the root of it may take a little bit of time. But when you can, when you don't dismiss what's going on inside them, they don't feel victimized by your conversation. They feel supported. They feel loved. Okay? If you're going, just stop it, they don't know how to stop it. Okay? So you have to help them find a strategy. So when they're being overly competitive, that's when we get to talk about what is it doing for you to be better than? Okay? What do you get out of that? Are you trying to know that you're doing the best that you can? That's not a bad thing. Or are you trying to gain someone's attention by being better than someone else? That's an unhealthy thing. Okay? In certain cases. So if they're rejecting compliments, I like the way you talked to your brother today. I wasn't, no big deal. Or, you did really well at school today. No, not really. Okay? I didn't, because, here's why. If you think they did something great, but in their mind it wasn't their best, you're complimenting something bad about me. And I don't know how to register that. I don't know how to process that. So if you're complimenting them and they're rejecting the compliment, find out why. And it doesn't have to be a battle, and it may not be something you have to do in that moment. It may be we'll revisit this in a day or two or later tonight kind of thing. If they're very pessimistic, Just everything's always the worst. I'm never good at anything, and you clearly are really very good at something. But they think negatively about their own performance all the time. You could have some perfectionism seeking in. This one is the one that really gets me, anxiety after the fact. They've already taken the test. They weren't scared of the test before the test. They took the test, and now they're worried about every answer they gave, right? Or they were in a play. They didn't have stage fright at all. They went out there, they performed, they did a great job, and after they come off stage, they're like, oh, I didn't hit that note, or oh, I didn't say, and I didn't hit my mark, and it was right there, and I stood right here, and nobody from out there could tell the difference because it's this far away. Like, that kind of thing. They may be very critical of themselves, but if you try to be, like, constructive criticism, give criticism that way, and they're like, no, I'm not. No, it's not. It's fine. Okay, if they're rejecting criticism from other people, but then you hear them saying about themselves the very same negative things, I'm trying to be perfect so I gain somebody else's approval, and if that person doesn't approve of me, it's not working, and that's what's going on there. So that's something to uncover. Procrastination. I think that's everybody on the planet a little bit. We can all procrastinate at different times, so that's not necessarily, if that alone is your only symptom, that doesn't necessarily point to perfectionism. There's something else going on there. But if you have procrastination coupled with some of these other issues, that's another sign of perfectionism. Negative perfectionism. Perfectionism can have two sides. It can drive you to be better, but if it goes to this dark side where you're constantly seeking approval from outside yourself in negative ways, then that's when we have an issue that we need to overcome. And then just that extreme attention to detail. Now, some children just are very detail oriented. Again, any one of these things by themselves is not necessarily a problem. But if you've got them all together, there's something going on inside your child that you really need to start kind of teasing out, talking to them about, giving them some strategies and coping mechanisms to help with. And then the follow-up to that is underachievement. There's 4 types of underachievement. We have, let me just kind of run through these real quick with you. Involuntary underachievement is environmental. This happens when we have a school that's in a district that does not have the resources, that doesn't have a teacher available that can reach your child's needs. And your child, in this case, may not even understand that they have different needs. No one's needs are being met, so it's all kind of a mess, right? So involuntary underachievement, we're here because we don't have any other option to be here. Classic underachievement, this is where you run into the anxiety and the depression and the aloofness and those kind of things, which, guess what? Those are all kind of symptoms of being a teenager anyway. But this is when they have really good logical reasons for why they're not doing what they're doing, okay? And they will logically tell you and process with you why they don't want to do whatever it is they're not doing. And so this one is the most concerning because there's some emotional something going on there, and you may need help to discover and uncover what that is. Selective underachievement, this one kind of comes across as being arrogant and rude, like our gifted children can be sometimes. This is when I don't like this teacher and I don't like this subject and I'm not doing this work. But I love that teacher, I love that subject, I'm doing everything I can to get a perfect score in that class, okay? So selective to me is a little bit more just, oh, I just want to knock you in the head, but we don't do that, but we have to try to help them figure out, you may not like that teacher, this may not be your favorite subject this year, but what can you still get out of this class that you may want to learn on your own? Or you may want to do better with a different teacher next year, that kind of thing. Help them figure out ways to communicate through that. And then under the radar underachievement, this is one that gifted children really do have a lot. they don't even know they're underachieving. You may not recognize they're underachieving because they're making straight A's, right? They're doing great in school, but they are not challenged. And they are not learning the skill of studying. They're not learning the skill of applying themselves, because everything is so easy to just get the A and go forward. So they don't look to a school administrator like they're underachieving, right? Oh, they're at the top of their class. But what if they're in 4th grade and they're capable of doing 8th grade work? Okay, so in a way, under the radar almost becomes involuntary at that point, right? We don't see that there's we don't see a discrepancy because we're only looking at that age appropriate or grade appropriate level. There's a lot of research on above grade level testing or above grade level work. There are whole books written on acceleration. There are 21 different types of acceleration, and whole grade skipping is only one of those. Okay, so that's the one we hear about, and people, oh, we don't accelerate. Well, that's not always what that means. You don't have to think skipping the whole grade. You can think, okay, we're in 3rd grade, but we really need a 5th grade math class. Can that work? Sure it can. It may take an aide or of you being a volunteer to walk them from this class to that class for that time period, whatever that may be, but it can be done. There's lots of different ways to do it, and most schools don't know what those are, because they're worried about the average of the students. I hate to say it, but each individual student kind of fades into the mix. So you have to be and help be the advocate to help your child not stand out, but in a negative way, but help your child can help the educators in the situation understand that other needs are going unmet. Okay, so we're not asking for something unusual for our child. We're asking for our child's needs to be met and for our child to receive the same level of challenge that other children are receiving. Because if my child is doing great right here, but they are not challenged at all, they're not benefiting from this education. Okay? Okay. So thinking about all of those different things, and there's others that we could talk about, NAGC, which is the National Association for Gifted Children, and we have an MAGC as well, Mississippi Association for Gifted Children. So NAGC offers these suggestions for parents. These things can help your child benefit. When you focus on their strengths instead of their weaknesses, when you help them understand what it means to be gifted. Okay, and there's a lot of tension and controversy in the world about that word sometimes, because, well, we don't want them to think they're special. Well, they are special. All of our kids are special. We're special in diverse ways, and we need to understand and embrace that. What are the outlets for their stressors that work for them that may not be available in the school, or that may be if you let the teacher know? They need 5 minutes to think about it. Let them have that 5 minutes. Give them a 5-minute warning before you change something in the classroom, because teachers are notorious for doing things on the fly. You know what, this isn't working. Okay, everybody get this out. For some children, that is mind-blowing, and I am very precise, and I'm bordering on perfectionism, but I just like to work slowly and carefully, and you just shifted gears on me, and I don't know what to do. So give them even if it's a 2-minute warning. In 2 minutes, we're going to change what we're doing. That helps them get in their mind what's happening next. So that might be an outlet or a strategy that you can help a teacher understand. But other outlets would be extracurricular activities, coming to programs like the Saturday program, being around other children that think similarly, going to robotics at the Robotics Academy, going do sports if they're interested in sports, or music and theater. We have Stage Struck and something else here in Hattiesburg. They're both theater groups. We have, there's pottery classes for kids somewhere on the coast. I mean, there's lots of different things that children can be involved in, but we may not know about them unless we look for them. And that helps you find those peer groups. Where are the people that are interested in the things my child is interested in, or that think the way my child thinks? Bibliotherapy is another one. If you found a book where that child is so much like your kid, or is dealing with something like your child is dealing with, that can be really helpful, because sometimes we can talk about what the character in the book is going through without revealing that it's us that really feels that way. And that's a little safer sometimes than just coming. And then, once you start having those conversations and they see that you're responsive to what they said about the character, Mom, I'm really talking about me. They will do that. And that can be helpful. And videography too. There's plenty of movies about gifted kids. I have a whole list of them that I assign to my students to watch. Like, here, go watch one of these, and then you write a paper on the teaching strategies used in the movie. But there's lots of them out there that you can watch with your child. That even if it's not about a gifted child, it might be about someone with an exceptionality and how they're treated differently. I don't know why the Peanut Butter Falcon keeps coming into my mind. It's a crazy movie, but that one and there's a movie called Gifted. I'll bring y'all a list. And then advocating for your child at school is really important. You don't have to be that annoying parent that everybody hates to see coming, but you can be that helpful parent that really offers suggestions and advice that teachers can go, especially new teachers, can embrace. Okay, this is again from Sing. When we're learning communication skills, these are communication skills that we can help our child understand. Okay? Both verbal and nonverbal communication is very important. So, listening. Learning how to listen is one of the most overlooked things that we do in business, in education, in the world in general, because I don't remember, I want to say 90%, and I may have my statistic wrong there, but I think it's 90% of us in a conversation already have what we want to say next in our mind while the other person is still speaking. That's not good active listening. That's, yeah, let me get my stuff out, but I really don't care what you're saying. Responding, knowing how to respond to people, not just saying, okay, whatever, as our teenagers want to do. How do you respond to that? Or asking, sometimes we need to ask that question and model that for them, and that's coming up in a minute. But what type of response are you hoping that I will give? Asking that question can sometimes be helpful. Asking good follow-up questions. Am I understanding that this is what you mean by this? Like, just clarifying. Not questioning as an interrogation, but questioning for gaining understanding, for that deep connection. Teaching your children telephone skills. We have lost that. When our phones went to our pocket, we forgot how to answer the phone with hello, or may I ask who's calling, or any of those. All of that has kind of faded off into the world. It's not as important because we can all see who it is and we can answer because it's our friend. But when they get an office job or they get an after school something and they're answering a landline in an office, hello, what, huh, all that it's not going to help them. So they can learn those skills. And then problem solving, any kind of problem solving skills that you can help your child with. That may be a board game that you're playing. That may be an outdoor activity. That may be, we're building something in our backyard. What do you think we should do with this? How do you think we should, just getting their help on things. And then nonverbal, these are more difficult. We don't necessarily, if we do it well, we don't pay attention to it. But the rhythm and the use of timing in when they're speaking. And this is where, like, dry bar comedy can be really helpful in that. Like learning how to circle back in a conversation for effect or for impact. Comedians do that really well. Learning how to pause. Learning how to take a breath and give other people time to answer. Those are all important. Distance and touch. Now this can be a cultural thing too. European countries can be way up in your face and really touchy-feely depending on the country. And Americans are like, no man, handshake, this is the distance we stay, you have your bubble, I have my bubble, we're good. But there are a lot of children. I had a student, one of the very first years I taught gifted, and she didn't understand the interpersonal space. She'd grab your arm and she'd hang on to you, and she just wanted to stand right there and just like, hey, I've got all these other kids in the classroom, and you can't be all up here. Like, this is not, I'm not your mama, I'm not your babysitter, I'm your teacher, and I love you, but, gestures and postures, the way they're sitting, this grumpy, thing that teenagers do all the time. Are we twiddling our thumbs? Are we playing with our hair? What are the things that we're doing with our body that convey, I'm bored, I'm not interested, I'm not listening to you? Instead of having an open posture, having that very closed, thing going on. Facial expressions. And if you look at this slide, the picture here, some of these are not easy to give an emotion word to. Like that one, B. Yeah.
Confused.
Confused, yeah. Contemplative, maybe. But, yeah. Look at E.
Not happy.
Yeah. Perturbed, maybe. And then F is like, kind of disgusted. But, we don't talk to children about this face that I have right now, this is what this means. And some of us, we get this very serious look on our face when we're concentrating and they think it means we're angry. So helping them understand that. What face do you make when you're concentrating really hard? Okay, great. Now I know your concentrating face from your angry face. They're very similar. Okay. And then tone of voice, style of dress, those are things that do play a big role in how other people understand us and whether we're conveying ourselves the way we think we are.
I taught my son how to tell somebody was lying.
Mm-hmm.
Give them a comment, let them give you the answer,
Mm-hmm.
and then when they gave the answer, you know if they were telling the truth or a lie, because you already knew the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, baby, that's their lie face.
Yeah.
Just remember it. And he does it all the time.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Okay, so listening and responding help us to help them. What we do when we listen and respond well, and this is one of those 7 habits of highly effective people. Seek first to understand rather than to be understood. Don't let your biases overtake your understanding. So I think my child is going to say this thing or that thing, right? So I think they're talking about this, and then you've totally misunderstood a whole stream of thought because you thought they were talking about something else. Let their perspective come first. Let them explain that to you. Now, that doesn't mean you never share yours, okay? None of this means you never share yours. But especially if they're in an emotional state, focus on them first. Affirm what you heard. So what I think you're saying is that right? Give them the opportunity to correct your understanding of what they said. And then again, ask, what is your expectation for me to act? What do you want me to do right now? Do you just want me to listen, or do you want me to fix it? Do you want me to help you find a solution, or do you just need a sounding board? What is your expectation of me right now in this conversation? That kind of throws them for a loop, because they don't think about, oh, my parent needs to know what I need. And that lets them know you care, that you want to be responsive in an appropriate way to them. Help them see what's inside themselves and what they cannot currently see. Okay? A lot of times we see great qualities in our children, and they don't see it yet. They don't understand. Like, you may be a leader, but you're using it in all the wrong ways. So you don't think of yourself as a leader. You just think, I'm the problem kid, everybody hates me, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's you that sparks the interest in the other children to do whatever it is you're doing that's off task. So that means, guess what? You led them. So you are a leader. Let's find a better way to be a leader. When you can co-parent, when you can parent with your other half from a unified position, you're creating that vision, and you have to be on the same page. Okay, kids cannot find the direction to go if you aren't giving them a consistent message together. Okay, and they will find the wedge between the two of you, and they will exploit that to get what they want. Sometimes they learn to manipulate when parents are not on the same page. Well, Dad said no, but I know Mom will let me have it, or I know Mom will let me do it, or I know they know how that works. They're pretty good at figuring that out. So being unified in your vision and your direction helps them be consistent in evaluating their direction. Okay. So setting a vision for your family is very important, and that's something that's our topic next week. Why is that? It's because it's about, if life is about the decisions we make, then there has to be something greater than what's happening in this moment. And we can convey that to them. This moment is passing. Who you are is more important, and who you are has more to do in this life than this particular moment. But we've got to navigate through this moment together to get there. And letting them know that you can let your child know this is right and this is wrong. Those boundaries need to exist for them, because if they don't know what's right and what's wrong, they're going to try to figure it out. A lot of kids know that if they do certain things, they're going to regret the consequence. They know, if I do that, my mom's going to be mad at me, right? I don't want that. So one thing you can say to them is, you're free to make your choice, but you are not free from the consequences of the choice you make. And that helps them understand what's coming up. Okay, so as far as our parenting, what does that look like? So these are two different styles of parenting. The titles for those are kind of harsh, but we don't realize we think of our kids as our property sometimes, but we do. We make that mistake a lot. And if you are operating out of an ownership-based parenting style, you are more likely to micromanage. You're more likely to do manipulative things, to bribe them to do things, which may work in the meantime, but it backfires later.
Well, then they are learning how to do it as well, and
Right.
probably going to do it better.
Right. Right. So if you are using coercion or threats to get them to do something, or let's just go get a lollipop. If you'll do this for me today, we'll go get an ice cream, or we'll go whatever. Not the best way to get their buy-in. Now, have we all done that in a moment of desperation? Yes.
We've all done that. It's about not making it your regular way of doing things, okay? Making mistakes is part of being human. Not making the same mistake over and over again is when we're doing it better, okay? Ownership-based parenting, when our child faces something new or a new situation, we tend to be sink or swim with it. You figure it out. I don't know. I never had to do that in school. Just do it. I don't know. Figure it out. We can be very passive-aggressive with our children. You know, especially if there's something going on between the parents and the child has done something that prefers one parent over the other parent, and then we get really weird with our kids. That sets up a bad thing. And that whole tit for tat, like, well, I'm only gonna let you go play with your friend if you do this, that, or the other. Which sometimes we have to make arrangements with our kids, but it's what is the spirit of it? What's the meaning? Like, are we doing it to get something for ourselves? And that sometimes we don't know. Sometimes that's hard, and we have to look very introspectively ourselves. If we're stewardship based, these are kind of opposite. Instead of micromanaging, we're going to coach. We're going to come alongside them and coach them up on it. Show them the little things, how to make it a little better. Not in a way that we're overpowering or overbearing, but when they're ready, when they're struggling and they ask us, why don't you try this? You know, if we're constantly, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, then that's not that open. Okay, that goes into micromanagement. Instead of manipulating, let's set clear goals for our kids. Instead of coercing, let's be their partner and support them as they learn something new. Let's train them instead of just throwing them to the wolves. And instead of being passive aggressive, we can be direct in our communication with them. And we can let them know, I've got your back. We're a family. We're going to support one another. Okay. In disciplinary matters, kind of continuing that thought, this is kind of how we handle those things. We can be punitive or restorative. Okay, if you're being punitive, we're punishing the child when our expectations are not met. We're very blame-oriented, it's your fault kind of statements. And we may be acting in our own emotions. When it's time to correct, are we angry? This is why it's never good to punish or redirect your kids when you're angry. Again, it's one of those things, we've all been there. You know, there's grace for that. We can go forward and do it better. And then on the other side, when their goals, instead of our expectations of your behavior, when we haven't reached a goal that we set together or that we have as a family, this is our goal for you. These are good things. How do we redirect them? How do we show them how to get back on track instead of, instead of blame oriented, we're solution oriented. We try to find answers to the problems. And then instead of acting out our emotions, we act in understanding. Okay, now, all that being said, in an emergency, things may look very different than they do in an everyday situation.
It's really like a command authority
Right.
sort of way, 'cause
Right.
it's about safety.
So one of the things that you can talk to your kids about is, you know me, you know I've got your back, you know we're partners and I'm going to help you navigate life, but if I ever start barking orders at you, it's because we're in an emergency and you need to listen to me immediately. You can tell them that.
Yeah.
And they know if suddenly you're like, do this right now, they may not see the emergency.
Especially if you're like used to having these conversations where you're explaining purpose.
Yeah. Like, just prepare them for that. If there's ever a situation where my personality changes, just do what I tell you right then, because you may not see it, but something's happening that I need you to just listen in that moment. And we talk about it later. We will talk about it later.
Okay, so when we change the way we speak to our children, when we change our language, our body language, our everything can change. Now, this is from Sarah Young's article, De-Escalating, Helping Gifted Children Identify Their Emotions and Regain Control. Okay, so Sarah Young. She is describing in the article a situation where she's been called in to help one of her gifted students who's in a gen ed classroom or a different situation. He's in middle school or high school, so he's way old enough, right, to not be doing what he's doing. He is in a ball on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. It's a boy in middle school or high school. I don't remember, it's like junior high age. Okay? This is not an expected behavior. This is not something that we typically see. Everybody else has tried to talk to him, the other teacher, the counselor, like they've all, so let's call in the gifted specialist to see what she can do. We don't know how to handle this kid. So these are some examples of what everybody else was doing. What had happened was that he did not make the math competition team. Okay? There were 50 students who tried out. They took the top 8. He was 12. Right? So really high up there, very close. But still, it's a high school team and he's one of the younger ones in the room. So a lot of the folks that were trying to get him up off the floor were trying these techniques on the left. I know how you feel, buddy. I didn't make the baseball team when I was in. No, you don't know how I feel because you don't know the work I put into my practice. You don't know how much this meant to me. You don't know what I wanted to do on this team. You know that you wanted to play baseball or football or whatever they said. So when we say to our children, I know exactly how you feel. No, we really don't. We can talk to them about having had a similar experience once they're over that crisis. But when they're in crisis mode, telling them you know exactly how they feel, clearly you don't because you're not in the floor with me, right?
Yeah.
So they're going to have that mental reaction instead of doing what you want. Other people had tried, well, at least you didn't get 50th. What difference is there between 12 and 50 if nobody in that range is on the team, and that's what I really wanted. So that's not helpful either. And then she didn't say let's just get ice cream. She used a bunch of different rewards.
A
distractor or a reward. Just get up out of the floor and we'll give you this. If you do what we want right now, you'll get some reward that is what is an ice cream or a lollipop or whatever compared to being on this team that I wanted to be on. This is not an option. So in our children's minds, we're trying to do all these coercive things. We're using all these phrases. It is not connecting with anything at all that's going on inside them. Because we're focused only on the behavior, not them. She took all of those things and said, don't try any of those things, try this one thing. I bet you're feeling really upset right now. Or I bet you're feeling really disappointed right now. I bet you're feeling angry. Whatever it is that seems to be the most prominent, I bet you're feeling this way. It's like, okay, yes, you're right. Or, no, that's not quite it. But it started a conversation, it stopped the crying, it got them on board with shifting away from the behavior.
Sometimes when kids are stuck like that, being able to let them know that there is an option to get unstuck.
Yes.
And saying something along the lines of, hey, I really want to hear what's going on with you. Let's go talk somewhere else.
Yes.
And that kind of gives them some agency, and then they kind of become a little aware of the room. They're like, I don't really want to fall apart in front of my peers.
Right.
You know, that.
Even though you've already, now the yeah. So that's really cool. Have y'all ever heard of the term verbal jujitsu?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's kind of like disarming those difficult situations with the unexpected comment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to do here. Instead of fueling that emotion with, well, at least this, you don't get me. You know, well, why don't we do this? No, that's not what I want. All of those things fueled it.
Mm-hmm.
Where saying, I bet you're feeling this way, was like that jujitsu flip. You know, disarmed the whole situation. Okay. This is also from Sarah Young's article. So she came up with some new responses that could help children who are in that emotional crisis or in that state start thinking in a new way. After they've calmed down a little bit, you're having the conversation. Here's how to start changing their mindset. What would you tell your best friend if they were in this situation? If this were John instead of you, or if this were Sally instead of you, what would you tell them? Is this going to bother you in an hour or in a week or next year? Is this really the way we want to go? And if they're saying, a lot of our children do something that we call chaining, and it's kind of like doom scrolling or doom prison, you know, they're looking, spiraling, yes, they're looking for the worst possible. If this happens, it's like if you give a mouse a cookie but in a really bad way, right? If I do this, then that's going to happen, and then they're not going to be my friend, and then I'm not going to have any friends, and then I'm going to fail 7th grade, and then I'm going to, whatever it is, right? So, what is the chance that's actually true? Well, if I lose that friend, then this one's really actually going to still stay my friend, because get them thinking outside of where they're stuck. And then actually, this sounds a little counterintuitive, but asking them, well, what is the worst it could be, can sometimes help them see that where you are now is not the worst it could be.
Yeah. This actually reminds me a lot of, so I don't know if you're familiar with like the Huberman Lab podcast. It's a professor out of Stanford who tries to like share like research with the public. It's free. They're usually kind of on the longer side.
Yeah.
So if you have a long drive, they're good to listen to. But he has one that's with an author of the book called Chatter.
Yeah.
And it talks about internal dialogue, and a lot of the strategies that they talked about in that podcast actually were listed here.
Yeah.
You know, that getting away from, like, he called it distancing, you
Yes.
know, being able to, you know, how would your friend do this, or talk to yourself in 3rd person, or, looking at worst case scenarios so that you're able to find agency around the situation. So there's a lot of things that you're talking about here that kind of help with like resiliency factors of internal dialogue for folks.
Yes, and that is very very true. So also looking at the best case, where do we need to go from here, and what's the most likely outcome? So having them look at those different scenarios does give them that agency that you're talking about to identify where they are on that spectrum.
Yeah.
Where are you? Where do we want to go from here? Okay. Okay, so we talked about changing our language. So if we change our paradigm, that's even more important. So my husband and I lead a group at our church that helps people let go of past things so that they can move forward. And it's not an addiction group or anything like that, but it's just whatever's holding you back, let's get rid of it. And this actually came from conversations I've had with our participants in that. And these are adults that are dealing with things from their childhood. And I realized and discovered, and I've tried this out with them, that instead of, we had one participant that just kept saying, are you disappointed in me? And I'm like, you're an adult, why are you asking me that? Like, I'm not your parent, what's the issue here? And so I realized she thinks I have expectations of her, okay? And I've worked with once I realized this, I've used it with other people, okay? And especially children. Letting them know you don't have expectations of them, you have expectations for them. Okay, it's not about what they have to do to earn your trust, your love, your whatever. It's about, because I love you, these are the things I want in your life. Okay? And so it's a subtle difference, but it's a very important one. Okay, so when we have expectations of them, that shows up in the behavior they have to have. If they don't have that behavior, bad things happen. Okay? When we have expectations of our kids, it puts the responsibility on them to do everything, but it gives us all the authority in the situation. If you've ever been in a situation where you had the responsibility for something and not the authority to handle it, you know that can be a weird, funky balance, not good situation. And then it implies judgment of who they are. If we have expectations for them, we love you, so we want these things for you, then we talk not necessarily about behavior, but about outcomes. What's the best outcome in this situation? How do we want to behave to get this outcome? Not just, are you sitting still, are you looking forward, but if you want to learn, are you being attentive, and what does that look like behaviorally? So the outcome is bigger than the behavior, if that makes sense. The thing that you want is not the behavior itself, it's what the behavior allows you to have. Okay? It puts you in a partnership with your child. Now, again, I told y'all last week, and I still believe it with my whole heart, and everything that I've researched says, a parent needs to be a parent, a child is a child. They don't need you to be their best friend. But, as members of our family, we partner together to get toward those outcomes, and when one of us has a problem, we're going to work together to solve it. All right? So that's what I mean by partnership. The child receives permission to act, and the parent can promise and provide that guidance that they need to understand the behavior they're supposed to have to get the outcome. It's like I said, it's a subtle difference, but it makes a big difference internally. And then the evaluation is not a judgment of who you are, it's an evaluation of what you accomplished. Did you reach the goal that you set as a family to reach? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. And this is something that, again, I discovered it one way, but I've used it in a lot of different ways, and it holds true.
Like it takes so much weight off of a person.
Yes. Yeah, it's a complete mind shift. Because it's just, one of those things that if I could have told my own parents something, this would have been it,
or even
right?
just in like job situations,
Yes.
like there's so much just as a person, you know.
Yeah.
Of and for.
Yeah, it's very different. It's very different than what I expect of you is all about you doing what I think you should do, but what I expect for you is about let's work toward this together. Okay, and so this is another one of my husband's sayings that he has, and it's so true. If you are not changing, you're choosing. If you're not changing, you're choosing to stay the way you are. And it may be what you need to do. Maybe you're doing something well and you need to stay there, but you're doing one or the other. You're changing or you're choosing. So essentially, what this is talking about is a performance-based environment that traps children in that space of asking other people for approval. But the outcome-focused environment aids children in seeing their value and gaining confidence in their own ability. Their value is not negotiable. Okay, it isn't about being their friend or conceding or accepting bad behavior. It's about viewing their life in conjunction with your life. You add value to me, and we add value to one another. Does that make sense? Okay. So, that is it for today. Unless y'all have questions or comments or I had a communication inventory thing that I thought about sending to everybody and saying, y'all fill this out and let's see how you do. And I felt like that just, the more I thought about it, the more I said, that just takes away from the other things that we need to get to. That would take up a lot of our time. But there are communication inventory, interpersonal communication skills inventories out there. You can look it up online. There's one called that. That helps you identify your ways of communicating under certain situations, like when you are stressed, when you are dealing with an angry person, when you are, all of those things. So that can, it's a lens through which to look at your communication style as a whole person, not just as a parent.
Are there any of those inventories that that provide, like, because that's like a self-assessment, right?
Mhm.
Like,
It is.
and you know, like my daughter, I feel like is old enough to be able to maybe give me some feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any that like are like provide like external feedback, or that would be appropriate for like someone to give a third-party opinion? You know.
There,
Because I just, you just don't know if
You're seeing everything accurately.
from your perspective, you know, and there's
Um,
things that you do sometimes that you don't
there-
realize you're doing.
There are, and I don't remember the name of the one that I'm thinking of, but there's one that you do, and then you give to either your best friend or your spouse or whomever, and let them do the same
Yeah.
one, and then you can compare. And I don't remember the name of it, but there are. The short answer is yes, they are out there. I just got to remember what the name of it is. But yeah, we can always do things like that to help us look at our own behavior. Being introspective, I mean, that's why we're here, right? We wouldn't be in a parenting workshop if we didn't want to look at what we're doing and see if it's on the right track. The good thing is, if you're here, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's what the research says. Yeah.
That's if you care enough to be at something like this, you're doing some good things, or you're at least aware that you need to do some good things. And so,
you might have a couple of comments in the chat. Just
Yeah.
See a couple.
I can't. That's showing up on that screen, but I can't. I can't see it and get to it. So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen if I can, and maybe it will show me.
Can you email us this slideshow?
I can. I absolutely can. I have got to figure out. There we are. Okay. Chat. Oops, hold on. Okay, there's a good morning there. Here we are. Hello everyone on Zoom. Okay. Okay, we have a question about school, about not being challenged in school. And guys, I apologize. I could not see this while I had the way this room is set up. It doesn't let me see all the controls while I'm sharing my screen. So, how did that happen? Does anybody online have any questions or comments that we need to address right now? Okay, the one that I do see is regarding not being challenged in school. That is something that happens to most of our gifted children at some point. And one way that we can approach that is to ask for a meeting with the counselor, with the teacher, maybe the administrator, and just sit down and have an open conversation about your concerns. The worst thing you can do is go in and say, this teacher isn't doing blah, 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 blah. My child feels alienated and this and that. Those may be true statements, but they're not the whole truth. Like, what do those things lead to? What is it that you want, and what is it that you're expecting and asking for? And so it starts with just having the conversation and saying why you think the child needs to be challenged in that particular way, and listening to what they have to say about what they can provide or why they won't provide. And then you have some factual evidence and information to go forward. It may be that they don't, well, we don't test for gifted until second grade, and if they're a first grader, then you've got issues there. Or, well, we stopped doing gifted in sixth grade, so that doesn't mean the child stops being gifted. That's, you know, that's one of those things where you can give them information that you found, whether it's from one of these sessions, whether it's from an article that you found online. There's a lot of good places, like Sing is good. And I'll type that in here, the one, that's one of the ones. Oh wait, I have it sent to the wrong. Okay, now I can't see. Oh, I'm so sorry. Is there an everyone? Everyone in the meeting. There it goes. There we go. That's one of the websites. And then NAGC is the other organization. The World Council for Gifted and Talented Children, or World Council for Gifted and Talented Children. And MAGC is our state organization. Okay. So those are all websites where you can find, oh, and the last one is Hoagie's. Hoagie's Gifted, like Hoagie's like the sandwich, Hoagie's. There's a lady named Carolyn that runs that site, and she is incredibly invested in the website. It is kind of huge and all things gifted in all directions all at once. It's not your most graphically pleasing website, but if you want information about something that touches on gifted, it's in there somewhere. So that's one that we often tell our students who are beginning their journey in gifted education. Go to Hoagie's. She's got something about it, whether it's, she's got parenting pages, toys for gifted children, games for gifted children, parenting styles, resources, all kind of things in there, and a lot of times it's pointing out to these other sites, but she's kind of like a one-stop repository for a lot of things. And so some of these others will get their agenda or their political stuff going on in there. She pretty much doesn't have one as far as that kind of stuff is concerned. It's mostly like, what did I want as a parent? I'm putting it in here. So yeah.
Just a quick comment about the not being challenged in school.
Yes.
We had a situation with our 6-year-old a couple of months ago where we were pulled into a counseling session for a negative thing.
Yeah.
But it was an administrator, his teacher, and then like the lead teacher.
Right.
And after we addressed the things, we kind of turned it into a he's not challenged.
Yes.
You know, and we found him to be very receptive. But during that meeting, even the lead teacher identified that yes, he needed some help, but not all teachers would be willing or able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But they did identify somebody who was a few grades up who was willing to send home homework packets.
Wow.
You know, that she made for the class, but that she's put together specifically for him.
That's awesome.
So, you know, it seemed like it would be a challenge if there wasn't that one teacher or his teacher who was willing to do the communication for us, which, you know, we were very fortunate to have that.
Yes.
But I could see a situation where we didn't.
Yes.
Where it would be a little more challenging.
Yeah, and a lot of parents have that very kind of dead end situation with the school. Well, we don't do that here, or we don't have anybody that can do that, or worse, all parents think their kids are gifted.
Yeah.
And that is the worst thing you could hear, because you know your child has something going on, and it's a dismissal of what you're trying to ask for. here's what I have found about administrators, and this is kind of a sad thing. If their children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews or somebody in their family participated in a gifted program, they're going to support that, and they're going to support the needs of gifted children. If their child tested and didn't get in, that's almost always a negative impact on your gifted program and on anything for, and I hate to say that it's that personal an issue, but in many cases it really is. And that comes from not understanding that giftedness is an actual need. It's an educational need that our children have. Like, the learning style of gifted students is different. The learning needs are different. The way they approach learning is very different than your average student. There's nothing wrong with being an average student, but when you look at, one of the things I show my students, my college students, is I show them the normal curve, the bell curve. When you put IQ on a bell curve, 100 is the top point, because 100 is the average IQ. And that's because it started out as a ratio of mental age and chronological age. So if your mental age matched your chronological age, that's 100%. That's a number, that's 100, right? 1 over 1. So, or 7 over 7, or 10 over 10, or whatever. You get a 1, so that's 100%. When we move a standard deviation, if you know statistics, that's 15 points. So 15 points above average, 115. Okay, you have a student who's doing fairly well. 130 is considered a full-scale gifted IQ. Now, we identify in Mississippi at 120 because poverty does impact the ability to perform on those tests, just because you're not exposed to the types of questions, the types of problems, those kinds of things. So for Mississippi, we bumped it down. Other states do the same thing if they're high poverty states. It's not, not a weird thing. So that 2 standard deviations above is 130. On the other end of that, if you go down to 75 and then down to 50, that's where you're getting other support in the classroom for learning. That's where learning disabilities happen. That's where students receive special education services. So when you can show an administrator or someone, my child is as different on this end as this child is different on this end, they clearly need something that's not that norm. And that opens people's eyes a lot of times when you can show them they are as different as this child right here. So that means what you're doing right here in the middle is not reaching them. It's not getting them what they need. So using facts and figures and things like that can help. Using that emotional appeal can help. Sometimes this is what we're dealing with when we get home. What is it that you're dealing with when you get home? Are they crying and frustrated over having to do homework that they've done? Or do you have a teacher that assumes, oh, they did these 10 problems really fast, I'll give them 30 more? No, that's not the thing to do. If they've mastered that, give them something they're ready to master, not something they've already mastered. And that's what you were getting from that other teacher in the higher grade, was something he was ready for. And that's where it's really important to have that communication. And that is a form of acceleration that is acceptable, giving them work. A lot of your school administrators will push back because they're worried about test scores. Well, they're a really bright kid. We want them to score, advanced in this grade, so we get those points for our accreditation.
Yeah, the standards. So if they're not exposed to standards and standards aren't taught on the grade, they're not spiraled or whatever.
Well, and it's the accreditation that they're worried about. So it's like, my child is not your ticket to your accreditation. My child has a life and needs of their own. And that's, if they're throwing that kind of thing at you, the test scores, that's when you got to get a little more, not arrogant, not rude, not mean, but a little more forceful.
Which is a little kind of strange to me. I mean, I do get it on the, like I mentioned, the standards base, but, a child who demonstrates mastery should easily be able to do something on grade level.
Yeah.
That was one thing I always talk to our Like,
Mhm.
you know, if we want our school to be a high performing school, but the thing is, like, if you're teaching well, and
Mhm.
you're reaching your kids, the byproduct is going to be scores.
Yeah.
So make sure you're teaching what
Right.
you're supposed to be teaching.
And that's, teaching has changed tremendously in the last 30 years, and even in the last 10 years, and since COVID especially, we've seen a lot more social emotional learning in the classroom than we did before. And I'm not saying that's not needed, because I think it is, especially post-COVID. Kids had a hard time understanding. But when that has become the majority of our time in the classroom, and we're not talking about academics very much, and that's one of the reasons I put the difference between teachers and therapists at the beginning, because I think in a lot of ways we're getting that point where we expect our teachers to be. Teachers will get questions from parents too. They're like, "Can you just do this for my kid?" And it's like, in what world do I have time for that? And what day, in what part of my day am I supposed to do that? Can I pack your child a lunchbox? I mean, like,
That's a whole.
teachers get asked for a lot of things that they just aren't, that's not in their realm of what they do. And a lot of times it's really, you know, can you help him repack his backpack at the end of every day before he gets on the bus? Well, I've got this whole classroom of other children that I'm trying to get ready to get on the bus. How am I, let's talk about some strategies we can use so that he has a checklist that he knows how to follow. But I'm not going to do it for him, like that kind of thing. But we just, there's a lot of things. Or, can you make sure he's sitting next to so-and-so at lunch? Because, well, when do I get to eat my lunch? Like, am I supposed, you know, I'm an adult, but that doesn't mean I'm supposed to be on a fast every day of the school year. So, and teachers do have to eat quickly already. There's a lot of that kind of thing that goes on. So, when you're asking for things from the school, be mindful of what you're actually asking that person to do, and what it means, and problem solve before you get there. Like, think about, if I'm asking for this, what does that logically mean for that person? What's something I could do? How could I meet them halfway if this is what I'm asking for?
Well, if we're talking about children too, it's like, you know, how are we empowering and making our children more independent, right? Our goal is to
And responsible.
enrich and, you know, academically, you know, move them, but, you know, sometimes those things that we ask for, we think we're doing in benefit of our child, but we're not developing the independence and the responsibility that we need to be fostering in them.
Right.
And so being able to, like you said, advocate in a way that, you know, does give awareness, but also, you know, that awareness can be that teacher, you know, being like, okay, hey, you know, tapping and be like on that checklist, and that kid, you're looking at that checklist and developing that confidence and independence.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that we want to do. There is one method, or not method, but one way of teaching gifted children is called autonomous learning, the autonomous learner model. And it takes them through the stages of, what does it mean to be gifted? How do I identify what I'm trying to do? What are my needs? How do I, you know, it takes them through from dependence on the adult to self-reliance. And I see somebody has a question. Fernando, do you have, Fernando? Okay, I think you're muted.
Okay. Also, all right. That actually, school. My daughter no challenge because on stage test, when she started fourth grade, she was already grade left. And then I considered moving in school. But her head, she loves her. You know, so afraid to the 2050. And how would you
You were cutting in and out a little bit, and what I think you're asking is about being able to move up in a grade level. Okay. The Iowa scales is a test that schools can use, and some schools do use if they have a particularly like a homeschooled student that is coming back into the school system. They will do those tests to find the appropriate grade level. it is appropriate for parents to ask for that test to be given to their child to determine the appropriate grade level and start a conversation from that. The school may have concerns or reasons that they don't want to do that, but that really needs to be part of a plan. There needs to be an overall, let's create a plan to evaluate the situation so that we can see what the best path for this child is, what are the needs of this individual child. So knowing their academic level from a test like that, in their, what grade level are they on in math? What grade level are they on in reading? Are there other concerns? Are there some social emotional things we see going on that we may need to work with the school counselor? For some students we have, I know for English language learners, there's a much more difficult path to be on the right grade level because people don't understand that language is not not speaking English is not a deficit. Tests need to be given in the appropriate language. Those kinds of things can be barriers that a school will throw out, but they don't have to be barriers. They just need to be, so there are tools that can be used. And that's something that, sometimes in these situations we can't get as deeply into something as we need to answer all the questions specifically. But if any of y'all want to email me something and want to know the name of a test or a situation, and I can give you that information or what I have, or I can direct you to someone who has it, so that we can, help you navigate those things. That's one of the reasons we want to get together with parents to help you solve those issues. So, it's not, not everybody in the room needs to know everybody's details, but like if you have a situation that you're really concerned about, if you'll send me, like, this is what we've done, this is the, what we've tried, that gives me a little bit more information about and knowledge of how to, what would another step be? What would the next step be? So, yeah. And I know most of y'all probably have it because you've gotten emails from me, but here is the email. Okay. If you need that. All right, anybody else? All right, well, thank y'all for a wonderful day, and go enjoy your kids. Have a great weekend. Stay warm.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be snowing here on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you all.